Welcome viewers. Was the Royal Commission into anti-Semitism and social cohesion in Australia ambushed? The proxy question. Every Royal Commission begins by defining the question it exists to answer. Critics argue that the defining question before the Anti-Semitism Royal Commission was straightforward. How has anti-Semitism affected Australians, and what should Australia do about it? They contend that everything which followed should have remained disciplined by that domestic purpose. David Ossip appeared to give evidence concerning anti-Semitism experienced by Australia's Jewish community after the Bondi terrorist attack on Jews, the Hamas attacks on October 7, 2023, and the events surrounding the Sydney Opera House protests and march on the Harbour Bridge. During cross-examination by counsel representing the Australian Palestinian Advocate Network and the Palestine Action Group, the discussion extended into Israel military operations, Palestinian casualty figures, and the conduct of Israel during the ensuing war. Commissioner Virginia Bell later explained that this questioning arose because Mr. Ossip had expressed opinions about Israel in his written statement, and procedural fairness required those opinions to be tested. Critics argue that the deeper issue lies elsewhere. They contend that once the hearing required an Australian witness to engage extensively with the conduct of a foreign state, the inquiry introduced a second analytical subject alongside the first. And instead of examining anti-Semitism as an Australian phenomenon, the hearing also became a forum for examining overseas events. For critics, this raised a difficult question. At what point does an Australian witness cease speaking as an Australian citizen, describing prejudice experienced in Australia, and instead become a perceived representative for a foreign nation? And they argue that this distinction matters because Australia's democratic institutions are formed on individual responsibility rather than responsibility by ancestry, religion, or perceived association. The crescendo of this criticism is therefore not directed at the existence of cross-examination itself. It is directed at what critics describe as the transformation of the witness's role. And in their view, the hearing risked replacing the inquiry into Australian anti-Semitism with an inquiry that partially evaluated an Australian's evidence through the conduct of a foreign state. They argue that once those two subjects became intertwined, the Commission's domestic focus was placed under strain, leaving unresolved questions about whether the boundary between Australian citizens and overseas conflicts had been sufficiently preserved.